Welcome back, everyone. In this video, we're going to start building out our agents. And we're going to start with the restaurant agent. So go back to your AWS console and under Builder Tools, make sure in Bedrock, go to Agents. And keep in mind, you should be in the Oregon region. Okay. Now click on Create Agent. And I'm going to rename this to Bedrock Restaurant Agent. Okay. Now we will want to enable multi-agent collaboration, which means that multiple agents can work together, but not for the restaurant agent. We only want to enable multi-agent collaboration for the supervisor agent, okay? Because remember, the supervisor agent is going to be the one that's going to be able to decide which agent to call, the accommodation agent or the restaurant agent, okay? So for right now, do not enable multi-agent collaboration. Now, I'm going to click on Create, and we're in the agent builder, okay? Now, what we want to do is scroll to select model and find Anthropic, and I'm going to select Claude 3.5 Sonnet, okay? Now, remember we talked about the quotas and we talked about the API remit rates. If you don't have access to, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, or your rates are very low, like 2 requests per minute, then, feel free to do Claude 3, Sonnet 1, or, whichever you have access to that has higher API limits. I'm going to choose Claude 3.5 Sonnet v2, and I'm going to click Apply. Okay, so now as you can see, this is the LLM that's going to be used for the restaurant agent. Now, keep in mind, I did tell you that whenever we're going to incur any charges, I will let you know. And right now, by doing this so far, we have incurred absolutely 0 charges. Okay, we will start incurring charges when we start talking with the agents. Okay, so feel free to follow along with me, and then when we start talking with the LLMs, that's when you could incur charges. But the charges are so minimal that for the preparation of this entire course, I tested these agents so many times, like at least a few hundred or a few thousand calls, like in API invocations, and I got charged like $1. Okay, so keep that in mind. But again, I wanted to let you know that when we're going to incur charges, and right now we're not incurring any charges. Okay, we're just setting up the agent, and once we start talking with the agent is when, we get charged, but it's so cheap that, the whole course wouldn't take more than, I feel like, a few cents if you did exactly what I tell you to do. Okay, so keep that in mind, and I will let you decide how you want to continue. Now, over here, the instructions for the agent. Okay, now I'm going to switch to a Google Docs, and you're going to have access to this Google Doc. Okay, it will be provided for you. And as you can see, here are the instructions for each agent. So the restaurant agent is over here. And it reads, you are the restaurant agents. You receive requests from the main agent whenever a user wants help finding a restaurant. Your job, determine the city in which the user wants a restaurant, determine if the user wants a fine dining experience, and that's going to be a yes or a no. And I specified to the LLM that this is important. You must convert the user responses to either yes or no. So that means whether the user says, yeah, sure, or no thanks, like it needs to convert it to, whether that's a yes or a no. And remember, LLMs are great at that. If the user doesn't specify, you need to ask them. So ask them for clarity. And once you have both the city and, whether they want to fine dine, you need to forward the details to the restaurant collaborators. And we're going to talk about collaborators later. Okay, essentially, each of these agents, so the restaurant agent, they're going to have a collaborator that's going to help them. And we're going to give instructions to those collaborators, but more on that later. Okay, so essentially the collaborator is the one that is going to interpret the results from the API call. So once the restaurant agent knows that, okay, we need to call the function, the collaborator is going to be the one that, okay, invokes the Lambda and then interprets the response and then gives it back to the restaurant agent. Okay, and the reason why we decouple these workflows so much is because the more agents we have working on a task, the less likely that they're going to hallucinate or make up information. So this ensures that the workflow is deterministic and it doesn't introduce any additional things that could throw off the workflow. Okay, now if this collaborator stuff wasn't as clear, don't worry because we're going to discuss that later. But essentially just know that the restaurant agent over here has a collaborator, and the collaborator does the invocation and gets the results. And then the restaurant agents, they gather the results and then they send it back to the supervisor agent in a format that the supervisor agent understands. Okay, so let's go back and let's copy this. I copied that and we can paste it in over here. Okay, and now we can do a save. Keep in mind, we're not incurring any charges. We're just saving this. I'm going to X this out. And over here, we have additional settings. We don't want a code interpreter. The user does have an input, but we're dealing with it differently. So it's disabled. And, you can have how long after how many times or second digit timeout, whether we want encryption, but we don't want that actually. Okay. And you can actually set up a knowledge base or like a vector database for the agent. But we've covered vector databases in my other course, so I'm not going to be focusing on vector databases. Essentially, it's giving additional information to the agent, so it's not that big of a deal. And right now in this agentic workflow, we don't need a knowledge base, okay? And we can have guardrails, whether, what the agent should be cautious of or what it should allow and what it shouldn't allow in terms of user input. But the default settings are actually quite good. Okay, and when I mean default settings, if you go to the orchestration strategy and you click on edit and you scroll down, you actually see that the pre-processing template, this is what the developers at AWS or Anthropic decided to tell the LLM. Okay, so we told the restaurant agent this, but on top of this, the developers at whether AWS or Anthropic also gave these instructions to the LLM. So as you can see, it has pretty good guardrails set up if you read the entire thing. For example, as you can see, it looks for malicious and harmful inputs, even if they are fictional scenarios. So because these are set up so well, I don't recommend us setting up additional guardrails for our agent. Okay, now I'm going to click back over here. And I just wanted to show you how, you can look at those instructions. And as a matter of fact, okay, let's go back because I do want to show one more thing. So we go to the orchestration strategy. And for example, you can have pre-processing or you can have post-processing. The KB is the knowledge base response generation. That's, essentially how it should handle the response from the vector database so the knowledge base is essentially a RAG solution. But again, we don't need that for our agentic workflow right now. And in the pre-processing, if you override this, yes, confirm, you can actually edit this. So you can override the default settings of the developers, okay? I don't recommend that because these prompts that the model was given make the model a lot better. So I'm gonna disable this and confirm. So as you can see, I did not modify it. I just wanna show you how you can override the system settings of the LLM, okay? Now I'm gonna come back over here. And you can actually test your agent if you want to. You have to save it and then you can prepare it. But it's good to be able to chat with this agent. But remember, this agent is only the restaurant agent. So, we don't want to chat with this agent essentially. We want to chat with, once the supervisor agent is ready. But, you can feel free to chat with it. Over here, you can chat with it. Now that will cost you, $0.25 of, $0.001. So it's extremely cheap. You can chat with your existing agent. And remember, your existing agent has these informations right now, and feel free to chat with it, but you first have to prepare it. But I wouldn't recommend, because once we have the entire workflow, we're going to be chatting a lot with the supervisor agent. So we don't specifically need to chat with the restaurant agent. It's just a possibility. You can if you want to. So for testing purposes, that's what I recommend. But since I built out the course for you, there's no reason to test out your restaurant agent. So essentially you could come over here and, tell it the city you want to dine in, but you don't tell it, if you want a fine dining option or not. And then you want to verify that it requests additional information from you, so that it asks you, like, for example, do you want to fine dine or not? Okay. So again, I wouldn't recommend chatting. If you do, you incur minimal, and really, I mean minimal charges. But again, I wouldn't recommend it right now at this stage, not because it's going to break anything, but because, it's not of use to us. Now, here are the action groups. Remember, the restaurant agent has access to a Lambda function. So this is where the action group comes in. So I'm going to click on add, and I'm going to rename this to restaurant action group. You can have a description if you want. And I'm going to create a new Lambda function. Okay. And here we can give the functions in the action group. In this action group, we're going to have a single function, and the name is going to be list restaurants. Okay. And this is going to take two parameters, the city and whether you want to fine dine. Okay. So over here, the name is going to be city, and this is very bad UI, but as you can see, I did type in city. And then over here, I'm going to say the city where the user wants to dine. Click on the check. And then this is of type string. You could have other types, but it's going to be a string, and it's going to be required. So it's true. Okay. Now, the other parameter is going to be fine underscore dine. And I know you can't see it. This is horrible UI from AWS. I hope they fix it. But if I click on this, you can see it's the fine dine is over here. Now, we need to enter the description. And this is important because the LLM is going to look at the description. So, if you don't have the city or the fine dining option, it's going to ask you to clarify, and it's going to know based off of the descriptions what these are. And over here, the fine dine is whether the user wants to fine dine or not. And I was thinking a lot, this could have been a Boolean, right? Yes or no. But I decided to leave it as a string. And I'll tell you later why. But when we look up things in our CSV, the fine dining column actually consists of yeses or nos, which is a string and not ones and zeros. So that's why I decided to leave it as a string, and we're going to make it true. So it's required. And as you can see, we have our list restaurants function done. Now, remember, the accommodation agent is going to have a single Lambda function, but that Lambda function is going to have two functions within it. Okay. So what you would do then, what we're going to do later on, is we're going to add action group functions. So you can add more action group functions, but for the restaurant agent, we only need one function, and that's the list restaurants function. And now I'm going to click on create. And again, this is not going to incur any charges for you because we're just creating a Lambda function. And as you can see, hopefully the Lambda function has been created. If you go to action groups now, you see that we have our function, and you can click on the view, and this is going to take you, hopefully, to that Lambda function, which is created for us. Now, remember, this is a dummy Lambda function that was created on behalf of us. So we're going to have to modify it, but as you can see, this is what we got, and you should have gotten the same thing. Okay? Now, let's go back and let's come over here down, save and exit. And actually, if you go back to your Lambda function, we're going to worry about that later. So feel free to exit out of it. We're going to override the entire thing anyway, so don't worry about that. And one tricky thing to note is once you've clicked save and exit, you should click on save again, and then you need to prepare it. Okay, so once we save it, we're going to be able to prepare it. And once we prepare it, we can use it. It's a little weird. I don't know why we have two separate buttons, but for version control, we're going to be using something called an alias, which I'm going to show you just now. Now that you've prepared it, click on save and exit and click on prepare again. You want to always make sure that it's prepared, the most recent version. As you can see, the prepare button is no longer here. And now let's create an alias. As you can see, a lot of things are being thrown up for me because I've created the course, and that's why it's throwing it up. But for you, let's just create a restaurant alias, okay? And create alias. And essentially, all this is good for is version control. I'm going to show you in just a second. As you can see, the alias was created. And if you scroll down, as you can see, we have the aliases, and they have an ID. As you can see, the associated version. So now, if you use this version, it's always going to have the same action, the same prompt. If you wanted to, if you changed your prompt, for example, you changed anything, you'd have to go to save and exit again. You'd have to click prepare. And then, as you can see, it's already, we can't prepare it because we're in the most latest version. But if we changed anything, we'd have to come over here and then create a new alias. Okay, but I'm going to show you how to update this properly, so don't worry if this didn't make sense. It's a little weird. I don't understand why AWS did it this way, but essentially you have to save and exit, prepare, and then, I just usually click on the save button again to make sure. And then we create an alias, and we know that alias is of this version. Okay. And each version has an ID. So if you update your prompt, your function inside the restaurant agent, you can just create a new alias, and that alias is going to be a new version. Okay. And then you can switch between which version you want to use or which alias. Okay. So I hope this made sense. And in the next video, we're going to modify the Lambda function that belongs to the restaurant agent.